Welcome to First. I'm Shirley Min, along with Nichelle Polston and Mark Eichman. The Americans with Disabilities Act changed the way we view the disabled. But 25 years later, we learned the law isn't perfect.
Wilmington's violent situation has been studied by the Centers for Disease Control. We'll talk about some of the preliminary findings this week.
How do you teach a split-second response, the kind of response you need to be a police officer? We'll explore that in our Teach Me segment. First, your public media news magazine starts now.
This summer marks the 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act. Designed to level the playing field, the ADA prohibits discrimination and ensures equal opportunities for those living with disabilities. While the law isn't perfect, this week's First Look shows the world of difference it's made since its passage. Nowadays, wheelchair ramps, breaks in the curb, and elevators are commonplace. But Denise McMullen Powell remembers a time when they were luxuries.
When I went to Hercules, it was very difficult because there were no elevators in the buildings. I'd ask about, well, what happens when there's a fire? How do I get out of the building? And they just did the, oh, we'll get you out somehow or another. A little scary.
She remembers her bosses telling her it'd be cheaper to fire her than to make the necessary accommodations.
They were actually able to say things like that, and there was nothing I could do about it.
That's what life was like for Powell before the Americans with Disabilities Act. The 69-year-old contracted polio as a toddler. This was before the vaccine. She used crutches and braces for a while before having to switch over to a wheelchair full-time.
I eventually left in 1989 because it was getting too hard on me.
This is attorney Brian Hartman. He runs the Disabilities Law Program for the Community Legal Aid Society.
Prior to the ADA, there were very few state laws that required commercial establishments, stores, and vendors to not discriminate on the basis of disability. So that was one of the major changes that you've seen from 1990 until now.
The ADA was signed into law on July 26, 1990.
It was ADAPT that was climbing up the steps of the Capitol building to get them to introduce the ADA in the first place.
ADAPT is a grassroots organization that encourages activists like Powell to engage in civil disobedience in the name of disability rights.
That's why I've been arrested 20 times.
People like Denise made the way for someone like me.
Emmanuel Jenkins has only known life with the ADA.
They fought for it, and now my job is to fight to make sure it's upheld, to make sure that it keeps going, to make sure that I make way for the next generation.
Diagnosed with cerebral palsy, the 31-year-old says the ADA is not about special treatment. It's about independence.
I want to be able to live. And when I say that, I don't just mean breathe, because I'm breathing, I'm living, I'm married, I got a kid, I'm doing great. But I want to be able to live, to be able to go to work, to be able to go to school, to be able to take advantage of life, to be successful without a whole bunch of barriers.
Jenkins, who lives in Harrington with his family, is grateful to live in a state that encourages and supports opening the door wider for people with disabilities who want to work and contribute.
Employing people with disabilities makes good business sense, and it helps government improve the competitiveness of our workforce.
But as far as Delaware has come, the newest employee of the state's Developmental Disabilities Council says there's still work left to do. For example, Delaware's Department of Transportation recently inventoried all of the sidewalks the state is responsible for in each county. The report shows only 44% of the total miles it maintains meet ADA standards.
They concede that there were problems in the past, but they're trying their best to move forward and to come up with a deliberative way to fix things.
Money's an obvious issue, but Hartman says sometimes making sense out of hundreds of pages of federal law can be tough.
Whenever you have a regulation or a law, there's ambiguity, and the ADA is no different.
It should happen that if you're not in compliance with a law that's 25 years old, that there is some sort of penalty and some sort of acknowledgement that it's bad and that you have to correct it.
Other states are also guilty of non-compliance with the ADA, so Mark, Delaware is not alone.
But if it's a federal law, how are the states getting away with not meeting the standards of ADA?
Emmanuel Jenkins from my story says a lot of it boils down to just lack of education. You know, people, companies, governments, it's not like they don't want to make these changes or they don't want to be in compliance with the law, but unless you know someone who is living with a disability, unless that issue really hits close to home, it's hard to know what kind of access or resources are needed and to what extent. For example, Jenkins is now working for the Developmental Disabilities Council in Dover. State-owned building, state-run. Even that building is not 100% in compliance. The difference, though, is with the ADA, it seems like the attitude has shifted. So everyone there is saying, listen, Emmanuel, let's work with you to make this office yours and accessible. And I think that's where you see that big change from when the law was enacted.
So how are the requirements under the ADA law enforced?
Unfortunately, it usually takes a lawsuit.
So really not actively enforced at all then?
Right. There are no ADA police officers out there looking and saying, hey, you're in violation of the law.
I'm going to write you a ticket. Right.
Right. You do have to file that lawsuit. And that takes a lot of time on a private individual's part, time and effort. And so that's a discouraging factor in terms of enforcement of the ADA. But again, it is not a perfect law. Laws generally are not. But everyone in my story says they are really grateful that they actually have a law to work with over nothing at all.
All right. The 25th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act comes this summer on July 26th. Thanks, Shirley.
Coming up on First, thinking like a police officer is the focus of our Teach Me segment this week. And there's nothing like a little witchcraft for creating interesting jewelry and a very interesting first experience. First person this week is Wilmington City Councilwoman Hanifa Shabazz. She represents the 4th District, but is concerned about the entire city when it comes to violence and the number of shootings recorded in Wilmington in recent years. Thank you so much, Councilwoman, for stopping by. Let's first start off with the violence in Wilmington. It seems to be the hot topic lately. I guess one of the reasons why you decided to push for officials from the Centers for Disease and Control to come here and take a look at the violence. Tell me what actually motivated you to do so.
Well, you know, I realized that the epidemic proportion of gun violence that was happening in our community could not be a natural phenomenon. Knowing the nature of our children, I've been in Wilmington all my life, that this had to be something outside of its natural, which meant that there was a health issue there, a mentality. For someone to, for our young people to be so heinous and to take a gun and take someone's life.
They stopped in last year. It's almost a year later. What are they working with? Did you guys provide them with any numbers or?
Well, they came and collected a data from all different aspects of our social life: education, health, social service, criminal justice, the hospitals, the morgues. And so they took that data from 2009 to 2014 of 564 cases of individuals who either were victims of gun violence or committed gun violence themselves. And so that they got a collection, and we also provided them other information. We gave them the kids count, we gave them the Hope Commission, we did the Bishop Morton's. She also did a report from the youth. We provided them that.
So they're working with a number of things. Tell me about recently a preliminary report.
They were able to give us some stats of the data. Like of the 569, there was high suspension, maybe 85% of them were absent from school, or 50% were suspended, had high suspension and expulsion rates, 28% dropped out, 60% had residential issues, 73% were involved in the juvenile system, 90% were unemployed, and various other stats. 40% had been investigated for child abuse.
Yes.
So there were centennial events or markers, I would say, that all of the individual cases that they had selected all hit those markers.
How important is this CDC study?
I think it's vital because it means it's evidently they felt that there was something that we were doing or that is being done to the citizenry that is causing this epidemic. So what it is taking a very intensive look at how we are delivering services and what type of environment we are creating. Government's responsibility, from my perspective, is that we create a sustainable environment for which our citizens to live and thrive and play. So evidently, the environment that our community is toxic right now, and it's compounded with the traumatic episodes that is causing our young people to respond in the way that they are. Is it our educational system? We know we have issues in our educational system. We know we have a high rate of teen homelessness. We know we have a high rate of unemployment. And from the stats from the report of social services, we also know that we have a lot of mental illness.
Switching gears, I'm sure you heard about the South Carolina man, Walter Scott, the incident in South Carolina. What about the body cameras here in Wilmington? Should Wilmington police be wearing them now?
Well, my understanding is that we do have a pilot program about to be implemented. It's either 6 to 12 cameras body cameras that the city is in possession of, and we're waiting for some legalities to be smoothed out before it's put into place. I think the body camera needs to get put into place as soon as possible.
Okay, and just to clarify, Walter Scott was an unarmed black man that was shot by a police officer. Thank you so much for being here. It's always a pleasure talking to you. That's City Councilwoman Hanifa Shabazz. Here on First, we're hoping to hear some useful information from the CDC soon on the violence here in the city of Wilmington.
First is available online. Go to WHYY.org/first to watch this show when you want. Past shows are there as well. Get our e-newsletter if you want to find out more about WHYY here in Delaware.
We have a new monthly series on First we call Teach Me. Delaware education reporter Avi Wolfman-Arent looks at the type of training and teaching that goes into everyday jobs. Now, when it comes to training, few professions face bigger questions than America's police. Hey, Avi.
That's right, Shirley. A rash of highly publicized shootings has thrown cops squarely into the spotlight. And this week, I take a look inside at what is perhaps our nation's most scrutinized profession. My holster is on. My gun is locked into position. I'm in the seaside hamlet of Ocean View, Delaware, and today, I'm going to be a police officer. So we've just gotten our assignment. We have been told that there's a call at a convenience store. There's a white male who's just stolen 2 sodas, placed them down in the sidewalk, and he's carrying a knife and acting kind of erratically. So we're going to get in the car now, going to go respond to this call, and see if we can deal out some justice here. As we pull around the corner, we're dealt a surprise. There's 2 men, both agitated. My partners and I try to calm them. Sir, drop the knife, please. But soon, the situation deteriorates.
Hey, man, put the knife down. You step away.
If my partners don't look like cops, that's because they aren't. And if the scenario looks staged, that's because it is. When it's over, we gather with some real police officers to discuss the faux bloodbath that just ensued.
Real quick, let's start from the beginning. What'd you know, and then what'd you see when you pulled up?
So what we knew is that there was 1 male. A lot went wrong in this 20 seconds of mayhem. We shot a suspect, we completely ignored the mysterious second man, leaving officers vulnerable to harm, and we lacked what officers call command presence. In other words, we probably should have used some more stern language.
Sometimes those words are attention getters, right? Where he may have not been paying attention to you, but now he's like, oh, these guys are serious. I better get back.
Our chief of critique here is Nick Manasco, a 15-year veteran of the St. Louis Police Department. My partners are local politicians, and all around me, other media members and community leaders are going through the same scenarios. It's part of the Officer for a Day program, being offered for the first time outside the state of Missouri. And if you're wondering why a group of policemen from St. Louis have traveled across the country to take journalists and politicians on a walk in their shoes, you might have already answered your own question.
Despite what, maybe how it's been portrayed in the media, Ferguson was a fairly quiet town. There wasn't a whole lot going on there in terms of crime. But now they're on the front stage, the worldwide stage. It can happen anywhere.
Brian Rossamano leads the Civil Disobedience Unit of the St. Louis PD. In other words, he's the head riot cop. And he's been on the front lines of perhaps the most intense debate on police conduct since Rodney King.
Recent current events has sparked, I think, the need to do this sort of thing where we can go out to the community and explain to them, this is why officers are doing the things they're doing. This is why we employ the tactics that we employ.
Those blow-by-blow explanations come during the lecture portion of the program. Rossamano explains everything from deadly force policy and the rationale behind it to the reason why cops are so brusque and demanding during traffic stops.
Don't reach into the car. Have the driver shut the vehicle off, have him remove the keys, either put the keys on the dashboard or reach out the window and set them on the roof. That can be seen as an intimidation or a harassment, but it's nothing more than just getting the car turned off.
Perhaps the most revealing part of the day, though, wasn't the demo or the lecture. It was the brief time I spent chatting with officers about their jobs in a post-Ferguson world. There's no question. They sounded hurt, defensive, and perhaps a bit lost.
The last 7 months in the environment that we've been working in, it's changed a lot. There was a point in my life where I would have probably been proud for my son to follow my footsteps. I can honestly say now I don't think I want him to be a police officer.
It's a little frustrating because I'm proud of my profession and proud of the people that I work with. Some of the insinuations and assumptions that are being made about law enforcement, especially in the last few months, are just completely untrue. It is sad that we've got to go to those lengths, but it's a reality, and a lot of people don't understand what we do.
This whole program was set up so that we, the public, could better understand police officers. But there were plenty of moments when it felt like they were trying to better understand us. After we filmed this story, there have been controversial police shootings in South Carolina and Oklahoma, proof that this issue isn't going away.
Avi, how has this training changed the way you view these latest incidents involving police?
Well, I'll be honest, it's made me put a new lens on things. You know, one of the things they talked about in the seminar, for instance, is why they handcuff suspects after they've been shot. It's a safety precaution. Of course, it looks really bad in cases like the one in South Carolina where they're handcuffing a dying man instead of rendering aid. It made me realize that sometimes things that look callous on film are in fact procedural, and the police are doing what they're trained to do, whether we like it or not. The other thing it made me realize is that universally, all these police officers said, the number one thing that we want to do when we go out for a shift is to come home alive. That's the mentality. Stay alive. It's a survivor, warrior mentality, and I do wonder if that type of mindset can survive all the scrutiny that's now going onto this profession.
In this video age, we'll see how everything unfolds. Okay, thank you so much, Avi. You can read more of Avi's education reporting on our website, newsworks.org/Delaware.
There's a showdown taking place in Delaware next month over the future of the DuPont company. That's the subject this week in our Dace on Business segment. Dace Blaskovitz discusses what could be going on at the company with University of Delaware professor Charles Elson.
What's going on at DuPont? DuPont has an activist investor named Nelson Peltz, and Mr. Peltz has called for significant changes at the company in terms of splitting up the company itself in different directions for the company, and he has now nominated several people, including himself, for the DuPont board. He is not seeking control of DuPont, but he's seeking a look into the boardroom. The company, led by Alan Coleman, a Delaware native, has opposed that and has suggested that, in fact, that his approach to the company is incorrect and that his nominees should not win. However, they have added two new excellent directors, I believe, in response to this criticism, and we'll see. The game has changed. I don't believe this point is being talked about yet, but the game has changed. It's the large shareholders that are now the vanguards, the BlackRocks. These index funds, through their passive investments, have become the large shareholders. Furthermore, you could argue that these sleeping giants are now awake and taking an interest in corporate governance. Talk about that significance.
Well, traditionally, the largest investors, really who own the bulk of stock in most American companies, including DuPont, the institutions control probably 85% of the equity in this country.
And they typically, traditionally, were quiet. They voted with management, and they were typically allies of management. Starting a few years ago, with concerns about company performance and corporate governance, they began to take a more active role. And in the case of DuPont, as in any of these proxy fights, they ultimately will decide who wins. It'll be not a small group, but not a very large group of holders, including Vanguard, Fidelity, T. Rowe, BlackRock, and others, who ultimately will decide who wins this fight, because they alone, 1%, 2%, 3% of a company, get 10 of them together, and suddenly you've got the battle won.
Let me give you a hypothetical. 2 reasons why perhaps DuPont will lose this battle. 2 different thoughts. From an investor's perspective, again, critics would say food is not a growth industry, and ultimately the mega billion-dollar bet by DuPont in China will ultimately fail, as China will ultimately, one way or the other, confiscate that asset.
That's why it's gotten so vociferous and nasty, if you really get down to it, because I think the closer you get, the angrier people will get in attempting to make their point. I mean, there's a lot of hyperbole in these things.
From a layperson's perspective, DuPont has played its proverbial poker hand poorly, in that DuPont had excellent performance versus index. That was the trump card. Instead, DuPont adopted, apparently, an appeasement strategy. And the minute provoked, DuPont sold, changed things. And that, in fact, validated the claim from the attacker, the challenger, the change had to occur. What do you say to those critics?
They make a decent point in the sense that if you've argued for a long time that things are fine, and then you take some steps that change the stakes, certainly in the midst of a proxy fight or leading up to a proxy fight, you do give the other side some validity. And had those not taken place, the other side would have had less validity in the points they're making. But by making those changes, the question then is, well, if they've got validity, are they valid on the other points? And that was an opening, I think, that in fact sort of turned the heat up. That doesn't mean one side or the other is going to prevail. It means it's a tougher fight than it would have been had those things not occurred.
Current events. The activists are running a big PR push, claiming, reportedly, DuPont's CEO sold a chunk, something like 50% of her stock, $80 million worth of stock. They claim that's a future bet against DuPont. What do you say?
You know, the timing was unfortunate. It was a 10b5-1 plan, which is sort of an automatic sales thing that you put into place that happens whether or not you decide to sell. But having that happen now, that large an amount being sold, certainly gave the Peltz folks something to talk about, because when a CEO sells a lot of stock, the idea is, are you really betting on the future of the, if you believe in the future of the company, why are you selling? Now, this was an automatic sale, and there may have been other reasons, but the timing, I think, was particularly unfortunate and gave them something that they ordinarily wouldn't have. Again, we'll have to see how this plays out with the other investors.
Let's wrap it up. Give us a prediction.
No prediction. I don't predict baseball games, judicial proceedings, or proxy fights. I think it's going to be close. That's why it's gotten so heated. And we'll know on May 13th. when those doors of that meeting open, then we'll know.
Charles Elson, thank you for joining us.
And thank you, Dace Blaskovitz. That shareholders meeting is scheduled to take place at DuPont's Chestnut Run facility. We will continue to follow this story on newsworks.org/Delaware.
Let's get a little wicked in our first experience this week. The Wicked Witch Studio in Bear is a mother-daughter team who make jewelry using everything from old watch parts to taxidermy eyes. Yes, their work is a bit weird, but these women know how to make it work.
We're Wicked Witch Studio, or mother and daughter team. I'm Jean and this is Katie. And we make all kinds of very bizarre and strange jewelry.
I like jewelry, and I really like things that are unusual and different. I don't want to wear the same thing my next door neighbor's wearing, or, you know, I really like it when people go, wow, look at that, where'd you get that? That's different. A lot of it's just experimentation. When you look at the end product, you don't see all the accidents and mistakes and the different experiments.
piece that I have on today was a piece that she'd made me for my birthday, and I saw it and it was just so different and so unique, and it was so much my personality. I said, if I can make things like this, I really want to make things like this. So that was the real kick in the butt that made it happen for me.
My plan worked.
It's funny now, I think a lot of people end up, they'll see the style of the jewelry that we have and they'll say, oh, hey, I've got a bunch of garbage in my basement that I don't need anymore. Let me give it to you.
You can make jewelry out of it.
We started not having maybe a lot of money, so recycling a lot of things, and we found gears from watches and bigger clock parts and taxidermy eyes and odds and ends like that that you wouldn't necessarily always find in a regular piece of jewelry, and decided to say, hey, I want to focus this whole piece around it. Some people see our sign and they say Wicked Witch, and they don't want to go into the booth, but I say that's fine, we don't want those people wearing our stuff anyway. But I think a lot of people buy it as, a lot of people buy our things because they've never seen anything like it before and they really want to have something different.
I like to do the jewelry because it lets me express like my inner weirdness. And I think some people that buy it and wear it too, because you'll see like a little old lady and she's all in her little suit and everything, and she looks so prim and proper, and she buys like this wild piece that we made and wears it, and I'm like, that's so great.
If I can spend a day in the studio and I'm just focused on having that creative process, and it's a real big stress reliever for me. I really enjoy doing a lot of the hammering. Whereas you like melting things.
I like melting.
I like smashing things.
I like to use the torch. I really like to melt things, and I just like to experiment with stuff.
It's a chance for other people to kind of get their inner weird out. Everybody's got that in them. If we have the chance to allow them to, through our jewelry, to step outside a little bit and to be a little bit adventurous, kind of rock it out a little bit, it's, that's very, very gratifying.
It's okay to be a little weird. Everybody is. Everybody has that little part, and I think it's okay to express that. And I think it's something that everybody should take joy in. It's a part of your life, it's part of how people are, and I think it's a cool part.
Their work can truly be called a collaborative effort. You can learn more about Jean and Katie at their website, wickedwitch.jewelspan.com. Both are members of the group Delaware by Hand, which is part of the Biggs Museum in Dover.
Next week on First, we update the story of a Delaware girl and her electronic voice. We first met her 2 years ago. We'll update her story and see how the technology has advanced since that time.
Looking forward to those stories and more next week. That is First for this week, though. We thank you for watching. For Avi Wolfman-Arent, Nichelle Polston, and Mark Eichman, I'm Shirley Min. Have a great week.